CTBK is more than just a full-service accounting firm. They are one team with an innovative approach to accounting and rise to each new challenge with collaborative problem-solving skills. CTBK goes above and beyond by lending helping hands in the Buffalo and Niagara community through volunteer work and donations, and is partnered up with Victory Sports for 2020 and 2021 to keep kids in the community active. The professionals at CTBK are determined to help individuals and businesses succeed. Whether a large corporation, a small business, or somewhere in between, call CTBK at 716-630-2400. Again, 716-630-2400, and see what CTBK's one-team approach can do for you.
Welcome to another edition of Tim Graham and Friends, brought to you by CTBK, CPAs and Business Consultants. I'm Tim Graham of The Athletic, here with my usual co-host, Jonah Bronstein of the New Bronstein Times. And joined on this episode also, graciously, by Shalise Manza Young, Yahoo Sports columnist. You've also seen her work in the Boston Globe, the Providence Journal, former New England Patriots beat writer, now covering the world of sports for Yahoo. And always like to check in with Shalise in life, but also to have her back on the podcast is great. Thanks for doing this, Shalise.
Thanks for inviting me, Tim.
There's a question that's been knocking around my head, and I don't really have an answer. So we'll talk it out here because there are three good candidates. I wanted to have you on just to explore this topic. Who is having the worst NFL offseason? I'm talking about teams. We'll eliminate the league as a whole, or Roger Goodell, or whatever, the whole mechanism. And I see three candidates. Maybe there's more if we want to get creative. You have the Cleveland Browns and Deshaun Watson. What's going on with Jimmy Haslam, who he's also talking about needing a new stadium. He's got a kind of new one, but it's falling apart. The team is falling apart. Of course, they're fresh in the news with Baker Mayfield being traded yesterday to the Carolina Panthers. I think candidate number two, the Miami Dolphins, Stephen Ross and his decision to fire Brian Flores, which causes a class action lawsuit that is embarrassing the NFL. And then the failed plans, as have been reported, regarding trying to get Sean Payton to be the coach and Tom Brady to be the quarterback, only to have all that blow up in their face. Or the Washington Commanders and Daniel Snyder and his refusal to testify in front of Congress, and that ongoing investigation, which only the NFL investigation anyway, not ongoing, but which only seems to have punished the Las Vegas Raiders, bringing about embarrassing emails and communications from John Gruden. So it takes down somebody who I think at some point would have been considered Hall of Fame material. Well, he's now out of the Ring of Honor in Tampa. I don't think he's going to Canton. So Shalise, I'll roll that at your feet. Where do you want to start on this? And do you have, is there a shoe-in in your mind, or is this a race?
My first reaction is yikes. The craziest thing is at this point, like as we record this on July 7th, Miami almost seems to be number 3 on that list. They obviously ate up so many headlines starting on February 1st, which is when Brian Flores' legal team on the first day of Black History Month decided to drop his historic lawsuit against the league. The Cleveland, I feel like it's the Browns only because, and there's many reasons why they could all, I think, sort of be number one, but the Browns are still in the thick of it, and their current issues are completely of their own making and completely avoidable. They are the ones who, despite 22 women at the time having filed civil lawsuits against Deshaun Watson, alleging various degrees of sexual misconduct and sexual harassment, signed him to a fully guaranteed $230 million contract, which, by the way, had a special carve out, for lack of a better word, that would make sure that if he is suspended for this year, he's minimally financially penalized, because, you know, that's really what's important in this situation. And so, you know, I think, like I said, it's a very ignominious list, but I think I would lean Browns, just because it's a problem completely of their own doing. It seems like with Washington, they're not a great team, but the Daniel Snyder stuff sort of seems to be separate from the team stuff, but everybody is involved in this Browns crap. You know, from the Haslams on down, sitting there and saying, well, we checked in with our daughters and they said it's okay. Okay, sure.
Yeah, that's a great point. You can take a look at the other two. If you're a fan of, well, all right, if you're a fan of Washington, you know, I don't think that it's hard. It's hard. I guess I can feel sorry for the Washington fans, because you don't get to pick your owner. Well, you don't get to pick a lot of stuff, really. I mean, I guess let's face it, you don't get to pick your quarterback or anything else. You don't have any say other than voting with your wallets. But the other two, the Miami Dolphins and the Cleveland Browns, if you're a fan of those teams, you're ashamed of what you see on the field. You're ashamed that, you know, we had a pretty good coach in Brian Flores. I thought he was doing very well, and and we screwed him over. Mm-hmm. We had, you know, the idea of our quarterback and the going back and forth, although they were flirting with Deshaun Watson pretty hard last year too.
Yeah.
And then Cleveland, you know, I'm from Cleveland originally, and I haven't really spoken with a lot of my family about it or anything, but I guess it's got to be hard to be a Cleveland Browns fan, to have Deshaun Watson as your quarterback. And to divorce divorce yourself from the fact of what he's done as a human, what he's allegedly done as a human being. Although the volume of accusations is incredible, versus the fact that he might be able to win us a couple of playoff games. I guess he, you know, potentially could win you a Super Bowl. I mean, Ben Roethlisberger, Steelers fans had to rationalize that or reconcile it. And that was a fraction of what Deshaun Watson was accused of. So there's no question in there. I guess I'm just saying that Washington, maybe we eliminate. Jack Del Rio, though, let's not forget him.
Oh, Jack Del Rio, that little, you know, tourist visit through the, you know, Capitol, through the halls of the Capitol.
Then can I make the case for Washington being the worst? Is that because if we picked our three, Shalise picked Cleveland, and you are going down and taking?
I think I agree. I think I agree with Cleveland, and the fact too that, and Shalise raised the point off the top, that one's not done yet. I mean, the other ones should be done and aren't, because the NFL has dragged its feet / been its usual incompetent self when investigating management. But, you know, the NFL, I guess, in its mind, has closed the Washington investigation, although politicians are keeping it alive.
Haven't they opened actually a second investigation since the second woman, the woman Tiffany Johnston, who made her public accusation on Capitol Hill earlier this year? I believe they've now opened a second investigation.
Right.
Whether or not we'll actually find out the details of that, who knows? That's more the NFL. You know, we said we were going to leave the NFL out of this, but that was one of my columns this week was and I think I've written it before, like Roger Goodell / the league looks worse and worse and worse in the, you know, 1 year and 1 week since that release went out on July 1st of last year, talking about, oh yeah, we're $10 million fine, and he's not really going to be in charge anymore. Wink, wink. And, you know, that we have guardrails in place and all of that other bullshit. Like, I'm sorry, I will always go back to why are they protecting him so fiercely? I refuse. If somebody paid $4 billion for the Denver Broncos, somebody clearly would pay that amount of money for Washington. It's one of the signature franchises in the NFL, or it used to be. Somebody would pay that much money, and at least in theory would be a little bit more likable and less gross than Daniel Snyder has been.
And isn't what Daniel Snyder has done, and I'm saying this a bit without having gone back and actually researched what happened in Carolina and doing a pro and a tail with the tape type situation, like it's a boxing match, all the different charges. But it sure seems that what Daniel Snyder's been accused of, and let's not forget the withholding of revenues and all this other stuff. It sure seems like what Daniel Snyder's been accused of is a lot worse than what Jerry Richardson was accused of. And the NFL chased him off pretty quickly. But anyway, I also don't want to derail. So I don't know, Jonah, I just want to bring you in and what your case, since we're talking about Washington and you wanted to state a case. Maybe we're going to talk ourselves.
Well, no, I mean, you kind of went in the direction that I wanted to go in. And I was going to ask Shalise, what needs to happen, or why haven't we gotten to a point where Daniel Snyder is forced or being compelled to sell the team like Jerry Richardson was, like Donald Sterling had been, in a different type of situation? But it seems like the black eye for the NFL is similar than it was for the NBA in that situation. And I would say, not that I don't know if I'm comfortable kind of ranking all the different misdeeds and who's done what and saying who's a worse person or which franchise has been the worst. But I would say that what Washington has is a series of issues going back several years, and really something systemic from ownership on down through the whole culture of the organization, and incidences that even trickle down to the coaching staff. And I don't know if they have a clean record with the players, but probably things that have been looked the other way involving players over the years, where it seems like something needs to change, something very big needs to change. I think of those three franchises, if any team in the NFL has lost fans over the last number of years, this is probably the team that has done the most. And at what point is it in the NFL's best interest to get a new owner there and push for a change?
Oh, and let me bring up one other point that I guess, if you're listening to this, maybe you're screaming into the void, hoping we bring it up. What's happening with Washington has hurt the league immensely from a stadium standpoint. It's one of the rare occasions where nobody wants them. They're getting turned down by all the different political arms that could help them out financially. And we did talk about this on a previous podcast about how the Buffalo Bills got their, almost $1 billion in public money, kind of under the wire. And now you have this distaste of helping out owners, and it's spread, and it's a national political movement among some. Bills have been introduced. They're probably not going to get passed because they won't get through the Senate, who has, a lot, they want to protect business and giving out handouts to billionaire businessmen is popular there. But Daniel Snyder, building stadiums is a big part of the NFL's paradigm of growth. If not adding teams to the league, we're going to build bigger and better stadiums and revenue streams. And if nobody wants Washington, that's hurting the other 31 owners.
I think, to Jonah's point really quickly, I think part of the reason why, my understanding from talking to my colleague, Charles Robinson, as well, is part of the reason why he hasn't to this point been forced out is because Daniel Snyder is ridiculously litigious. And so if they, it's kind of like a staring contest, basically, just a billionaire game of who blinks first. And if the league tries to push him out, he has dirt on them too. And I think that's a big part of it. But to the broader point, to Tim's point, it's not even just the dirty deeds. It's that he has sullied what used to be a great brand. Whether you liked the Redskins name or not, which obviously it had to be changed, but Washington used to be a premier franchise in the NFL. It is in one of the biggest media markets in the country, which that doesn't matter as much nowadays, but it's still in a big city. It's in a diverse area, one of the most diverse areas in the country, really. It's in the nation's capital. The stadium is a dump. I mean, we all remember what happened at the end of the season with that Eagles game when the rail gave loose. They just announced the sites for the World Cup, the men's World Cup that's going to be in North America in a couple of years. And the Washington Stadium there's not even going to be a World Cup game in the capital of the United States because that stadium is such a dump. And because it's such a dump, they tried to, I think, put the Ravens Stadium into the mix and pair Baltimore and DC together, and it still wasn't chosen. So it's not just that Daniel Snyder himself is a jerk. It's not that we have 20 years of him just terrible behavior, suing like grandmothers who were 40-year season ticket holders because, when the housing crisis happened in 2008, this real estate agent granny couldn't afford to pay all of her season ticket money in one lump sum. He sued her. I mean, come on. There's just story after story of all this stuff, let alone the sexual harassment, the in-office stuff. He's terrible for the brand. And I have to believe that it comes back to he has as much crap on the league and the other owners as they have on him. And so the women who are victimized by the workplace culture in Washington are, thrown under the bus in all of this. And it's just terrible. It really is. I mean, Jonah, you make a fair argument but you could also almost make the argument that this is a multi-year thing for Washington in terms of bad off seasons, bad in seasons. I mean, they traded for Carson Wentz like he's the answer. Even on the field, are they going to be great? The Browns thing, just the audacity of it to me is so gross. But Washington has a hell of an argument.
What about the possibility, or it seems to be in some way stealing money or hiding revenue sharing from the rest of the league? Is that a bridge too far when you break the kind of financial contract that these owners have with each other?
I don't know what you think, Tim, but I think it will depend on if we see the numbers. If we find out he was hiding, I don't know, $500,000 here, $500,000 there.
And maybe they all do that in a way.
Yeah. And that's sort of, because I'm a pessimist when it comes to the NFL. I think that's part of the reason why they're not doing much on this workplace stuff so far, because I think a lot of these owners are like, oh crap, this happens in my office all the time too. So if we come down hard on him and my stuff comes out, they might come down hard on me. I have no faith of the NFL ever doing the right thing in any situation.
I'm a cynic in that regard too. Because just think about it. I mean, if we just play it out as a hypothetical, if you have all 32 owners with a wink, wink, and you're all allowed to do some kind of fudging, the only people you're hurting are the players, because it affects, you're going to impact the salary cap. And there's revenue sharing and this, that, and the other. But, the NFL has done some things where they tweet there's little things that are grandfathered in for the big market teams. And namely, it's your preseason games where you're allowed to have your own broadcast teams. That's why you see a totally different set of broadcasters for a preseason game that you do for the national broadcasts. Every team brings out their little unit and they sell it with all their ads. It's all local ads. Same thing with the radio deals. You don't have to consider that. And that was kind of a carve out to keep people like Jerry Jones and John Mara happy. And of course, Daniel Snyder, or whoever the owner of the Washington our words were at the time. Then, so there's other things too that are just kind of considered acceptable practices within the league office. There's that aspect of it that it may be that if we don't hear more about that as time goes on, or if it doesn't get traction as something that's really bad, then I think we are right to be extra suspicious, because you're right, Jonah. I do think that that's a big one. I think, though, to bring Miami back into the conversation, I've said this from the beginning. I've thought that the Miami situation is the most dangerous for the NFL because of the class action lawsuit. Now, that hasn't really gotten the traction that I thought it would, although it's still very much alive. And there have been some victories along the way as the NFL tries to get it dismissed and all these other things. So I don't know, Shalise, I'll ask you your thoughts on that. On Brian Flores' lawsuit, we heard some tough allegations right off the bat from Hugh Jackson that he kind of walked back. And but what do you think about that lawsuit and its potential to make an impact in the NFL, or have you lost faith in that in the, what's it been, 5 months since it was announced?
I'm disappointed that more men haven't stepped forward, because as you know, it's not like what Brian is alleging is new. You know, if you talk to almost any Black man who has spent any amount of time either as an NFL assistant coach or in an NFL front office, they all know, they all know that you're not going to get hired. You have to be an absolute unicorn. You have to, if you turn down an interview, even when you know that the interview is solely for them to check the box of the Rooney Rule, then they're going to, it's a damned if you do and damned if you don't sort of thing. You have to go to those interviews, even when you know that they're not legitimate interviews. It's disappointing that only 2 other men have stepped forward. I understand for younger coaches that it's terrifying probably to blow up your career aspirations. However, there are older coaches, more older coaches, I hope, and I know, that feel the same way, and there's strength in numbers. It's the same thing with the Deshaun Watson situation. It becomes eminently more believable to more and more and more people, even though there are some jackasses who still doubt all of this. But 24 women who all have very similar stories alleging the same thing, it's really hard to deny that. In the same way, when Brian Flores was out there on an island before he was joined by the 2 men who joined him, it was very easy to paint him as just a bitter Black man. He got fired, so he's whining and da-da-da-da-da. Well, now there's 3, so there's strength in numbers. But if that number grows to 8 or 10 or 12 or more, it just becomes a lot harder to deny. And we need more people. I'm totally drawing a blank on the white coach who stepped forward and said, yes, this happens. Was it Wisenhunt?
Well, yeah, but also an Arizona connection, Steve Wilkes. I mean, I don't know that he's really stepped forward, but he was let go after 1 season so that the Cardinals could hire Cliff Kingsbury. And maybe that's become a self-fulfilling prophecy, but he didn't have much improvement in his first season. And he, of course, had double-digit wins last year with Kyler Murray, and you find your quarterback, and that's the type of stuff that happens. I'm sure Steve Wilkes would have liked to have had Kyler Murray.
There's multiple, there's multiple coaches, head coaches, assistant coaches. I mean, it's just.
But Steve Wilkes would like to keep working in the NFL. It takes a guy like Brian Flores who is willing to pretty much burn down his career for the sake of standing up for what he feels is right. A lot of people think that, it's him being bitter over being fired or whatever, but the guy's just put his career up in flames. And I think there's something to be said for his willingness to do that. I mean, it wasn't as though he just did it in the moment. Hell, like he did it as a whim, like, screw it. And then a week later was like, man, I shouldn't have done that. He had to do it, or at least he put himself and his career on the line for this.
I think, and I've gotten the chance to see Brian Flores since he filed the lawsuit. I saw him in New York City in late March, I think. And he is very resolute. I think the NFL probably, and they probably still believe this, that they were able to, get him in a meeting room and slide a check across the table and say, tell us how many zeros we have to put on it, and let's just make this whole thing go away. I don't think that that's going to happen, with the caveat that everybody has a price, but Flo he's just not the one. He's not somebody who's going to cave. I think he's in this to the end. I hope he's in it till the end, because I think something needs to change. When we're talking about, as you said, this lawsuit is potentially the most dangerous for the league of the things that we're talking about. Although you could make the argument that the Browns screwed the rest of the owners with their Deshaun Watson contract, because if you're, I don't know, Joe Burrow and your
Right.
contract's coming up, and you could be like, hold on a second, this guy got $230 million guaranteed with sexual assault allegations floating out there. You better just back up a whole bank to my front door, because as far as we know to this point, Joe Burrow is spotless, and he's more successful.
Mike
as a
Brown, you
quarterback.
better not bring up the fact that I'm vocal on abortion and gun safety during this negotiation, because I got something to shoot back right at you within your own division about who gets paid and what they do off the field.
Exactly. No, I think, like I said, Flores's lawsuit has the potential to be, hopefully bring about, real revolutionary change in the NFL. We've seen that it takes time. I mean, look, it's only been, I think last year, there were 10 black starting quarterbacks for week 1. And that was the most ever. Still only, not even a third of the league. But the fact we are seeing more black GMs. Just today, we saw the announcement or the news that the Raiders are hiring a black woman to be their team president, which is amazing. So we're seeing some change in the front office, but
That's another team that's had a rough off season.
Also, I don't think off season.
They don't make the cut. They don't make this other cut, but bringing in Colin Kaepernick, do you think, all right, here's the cynic in me. Do you think that the Raiders are making moves because they don't want to get into this conversation? So I'm not thinking they're listening to Tim Graham and Friends, brought to you by CTBK CPAs and business consultants.
It's funny because
the whole idea about this is, hey, let's bring in Kaepernick. We'll show that we have an open mind about this shit. And all right, let's hire a black woman to be our president. There's nothing wrong going on here.
I was just texting since the news came out of their hire. I was just texting with a source I have in the Raiders front office, and he said that Mark Davis has finally gotten rid of all the people who were basically taking advantage of Mark. And now it's Mark's making the decisions. So I think when you see the hiring of the new team president, bringing in Colin Kaepernick, I think those things are Mark driven. Let's not forget, Mark Davis bought the Las Vegas WNBA team also. So he's, the apple hasn't fallen too far from the tree in terms of, the things that his father did in terms of being, I guess, a rebel, at least in NFL ownership circles, and actually looking at human beings as human beings, first and foremost, and capable, no matter what they look like, man, woman, ethnic background, whatever the case may be. I mean,
haircut.
How many times have we talked to Amy Trask? Oh, of course, haircut.
Yeah, haircut. You don't want to judge anybody by a haircut.
He's
in the Raiders organization.
He's not the, most fashionable guy, Mark Davis, but in terms of NFL franchise owners, he's freaking amazing compared to his peers.
I'll tell you this. So I have, this is totally anecdotal, but I've had a couple of interactions with Mark Davis, just human being wise. I ran into him at one point at it was at the Pro Football Hall of Fame induction. I can't remember. I think it was the year Ken Stabler got in, and I bumped into him. He had no press around or no executives or a PR person around him. And I bumped into him, and I got a quote, and you get the brush off. They see the media and they run the other way. And of course, he's during the Bills stadium deal. He's always accessible and seemed to be a nice guy. That doesn't mean anything necessarily. I'm just talking about, but I had my nephew ended up meeting me at the Hall of Fame Hotel, because he lives in Northeast Ohio, and he met me, and we were having dinner there. And in the booth next to us sit Mark Davis and Ted Hendricks. And my nephew is geeking out, and all of a sudden we notice there's kind of Hall of Famers all over. And he overheard us talking, Mark Davis did. And he came over, and Ted Hendricks came over too, and said, "Hey, do you want a picture?" Because he knew he was just having a good time. And I was like, that's pretty cool. He didn't have to do that. And he offered it because he overheard whatever my nephew was saying about how cool this is. I can't believe it was just kind of a nice thing to do. But that doesn't necessarily mean that doesn't make you a prince of a man.
No,
Nor do your
they're all
acid wash
complicated.
jeans, as stylish as those acid wash jeans are.
They're all
They
co- I
don't
mean, they're all
guarantee anything
complicated.
about the makeup of your spirit.
Yeah. I mean, you could probably find similar stories about Jerry Jones in terms of like being friendly. I'm sure they're usually women.
But we've seen some of those pictures.
Right. But they're all complicated creatures. I don't think Mark Davis should be put up for a Nobel Peace Prize or whatever, but
I probably shouldn't even have mentioned what I just mentioned, because it really doesn't matter. I mean, there are nice people. Awful people can do nice things.
Awful people.
So I don't even know what
nice
I'm trying to say when I told that story.
He could have done nothing though. Like, I mean, he didn't have to do anything. It's a small feather in his cap, I think.
Like one of those little feathers from a down pillow, like that sneak out of the pillow sometimes, like that little, or it sticks to your clothes.
It's true.
Like that.
It's true.
And you're kind of like, it's a feather.
He did something. He could have not done anything. They're all complicated. I think, like I said, at the end of the day, relative to most of the other owners, it seems like Davis, at least, like I said, like his father, sees human beings as human beings. He clearly, to buy the WNBA team, the Aces, I think he's also footing the bill for a new practice facility for them. So they'll have a team headquarters and stuff like that.
That's good to hear. I mean, you're right.
Yeah.
And you're right. It does matter. And when I say good to hear, the part where you say that he had some people around him that were taking advantage.
Yeah.
It's encouraging to me that, all right, maybe Mark Davis is all right. The things that you're saying about Dan Snyder, I don't think that you can blame on the people around him, because he is such a micromanager. And, the infamous stories about when you run into him and say, "Hi, Dan," or something like that, and he'll correct you and say it's Mr. Snyder.
Yeah.
Fuck you.
I mean, there was somebody, I think it was Andrew Brandt on Twitter. He tweeted something about that, like somebody who was, not quite as wealthy maybe as Dan Snyder is, but somebody who was, I think their kid was at Dan's house for a play date with one of Dan's kids or something like that. And the parent was like, "Hey, Dan." And he was like, "It's Mr. Snyder." Are you friggin' kidding me? Like, it's a parent, it's a fellow parent. Their kid was at your house to hang out and do whatever. This is not some $15 an hour underling in the ticketing department, that you demand fealty from them at all times. He's on another level. And I really do think at the end of the day, the fact that he could go nuclear on the league if the league tried to shove him out is a big part of what's happening behind the scenes in all of this. It's all a mess. The NFL is just biding its time and hoping the first Thursday in September. So they have the season opener between the Rams.
Bills at Rams.
Bills, Rams. They just need that to get here, and, hope that everybody forgets about it, because they'll be too tied up in their fantasy teams and all of that kind of stuff to really care about sexual harassment and 175,000 massage therapists, not even all of them therapists. Like, the last SI story said one woman was like, "I don't know how to give massages, but I can do a skin treatment on your back." And he's so gross. It's so gross. And anybody who wants to believe that he is innocent don't at me. Don't at me. I'm not saying I don't know. Nah, that it's complicated. I know it's complicated to some people, because maybe some women he reached out to were fine to engage in some sort of sexual activity with him, but that does not mean that 25 to 30 women or whatever the number is did not. And people who want to draw a parallel with Robert Kraft, the woman involved in the Robert Kraft situation, she knew what she was supposed to do. You know, she knew that she was supposed to provide a
She
happy
didn't
ending
press
for him.
charges.
Right.
He was pulled over after he left the facility.
Right. It was a prostitution thing. You know, that woman, for as far as we know, knew that part of the deal was she was supposed to provide a happy ending. The women who are making the accusations against Deshaun Watson went into it thinking that they were potentially going to have the franchise quarterback of the Houston Texans as a client when they're trying to start a micro business. And this thing, you know, the last the last Jenny Vrentis New York Times story, when, you know, he's using, oh, I'm just trying to support a Black business. Screw you, dude. That makes me even more pissed about the whole thing, because you're preying on your own community, you know, that you sat
doing
there
it out of pride.
Yeah. Oh, I'm just trying to support a Black business. Like, it's not hard enough for any woman, really, but especially a Black woman, to try to start her own business and maintain a small business, a micro business. I could go on and on and on. That case, it just infuriates me and disgusts me. And even more so that the Cleveland Browns are just like, who gives a shit? If he wins a couple games for us, that's all we care about.
Willing to hit on some other topics before we let you go, Shalise?
Of course.
Can I
And
ask one
Jonah too.
follow-up
Sorry,
question?
Jonah.
Well,
Yeah.
One thing I'm curious about with that, I don't know, this could get kind of dangerous territory because I don't want to accuse anybody of anything, but do we think Deshaun Watson is unique and an anomaly among professional athletes or famous people in some of his behavior? And I don't know if that matters, but it just seems to me like Deshaun Watson might not be the only famous person behaving this way.
So specific to, I have talked to one or two former players, and there are several who have gone on the record on Twitter who have said, in terms of massage, if you are serious about getting therapeutic massage, you find 1 to 3 maximum. And they're usually,
And you go through the team.
you usually go through the team, or you just find somebody, you know, that can do the job that you need done, that can address, you know, if you and I go to our neighborhood day spa for a massage, they're going to do a very different massage on you and I than they're going to do on a professional NFL athlete, you know, an elite level athlete. If you're talking about therapeutic massage, and really they probably tend to be men, just because they're a little bit stronger and can provide a more thorough and deeper, massage, and stuff like that. I do look, if Deshaun Watson wanted happy endings or has some sort of fantasy or control thing or whatever, he had the money to do that, right? There are sex workers who are willing to be sex workers. They're on board with what's going to happen. And the more money you can pay for discretion, like if that's your kink or that's what it is, that's fine. Like, but luring women under the idea that, you know, you can help their small business, and then putting them in situations where, you know, multiple of them said this wasn't cool. You know, there are exchanges where they're saying he's apologizing for the way that he behaved. So he knew he had done something wrong, and he still kept doing it. I mean, I think in any walk of life, famous people, not famous people, rich people, not rich people, people always do bad things. But he had a ton to lose. And there were multiple women who said, dude, what are you doing? And he kept going. So there's something not right. You know, the most famous example in terms of like a massage therapist or somebody who works with you is Tom Brady. I mean, Tom Brady's so close to his guy, Alex Guerrero. Alex Guerrero is, I think, the godfather to Tom's 2 younger kids. Like, if Deshaun Watson really, really was interested in massage, because when he did his little bullshit press conference in March, when the trade finally happened or whatever, And he was pressed on it. And he's like, well, timing and this and that. Dude, even on your rookie contract, you had the money to find 1 or 2 massage therapists and offer them, let's say, triple their usual rate. If I call you at Tuesday at 3:00 and say, hey, I just had a really tough lift, can you be here by 5? And you're tripling their rate. You had the money for people to be at your beck and call, if in fact that's what you were looking for. And I think, there's just so much evidence that points to he wasn't interested in actually having therapeutic massage. He has some kink. But again, if you have some sort of sexual kink, the thing is that everybody needs to be on board with that. And
in reading the coverage,
a lot of people weren't.
But most notably, Jenny Vrentis' story, which is probably the best piece of journalism on the topic, unless you want to go back to the very initial parts of it, you can probably, try to compare apples to oranges. But Jenny Vrentis' story in the New York Times was sensational. But it sounded to me, like you say, the happy ending aspect of it. You kind of alluded to it early on in what you were saying there. It's almost like that wasn't even the point. To me, it sounds like, a flasher. It's about dominance. It's about the surprise. I want to see your reaction. I'm going to try to convince you to do something you don't want to do. You didn't think you wanted to do it, but I'm going to make you do it, or I'm going to make you look. Or when it was explained through her, through the accusers, in the accuser's own words, that's certainly what it sounded like. It sounded like a dominance aspect, which again, I don't want to compare, but it sounds even more dangerous to me.
It seems like it's a power thing. And women forever have been put in this impossible situation. I was in a situation when I was Patriots beat reporter that, a NFL GM at the Senior Bowl was like, oh, can I come back to your hotel room with you? And I told him no, but I couldn't say anything really beyond that because I'm the reporter, they're the GM, and I'm a woman at the time, the only Black woman covering any NFL team on a regular basis. I would have been, who knows what would have happened, threats. And if I had gone public with what had happened to me, who knows, And so this is the things that we have to weigh all the time, because if I had said something, I might have been in danger. My family might have been in danger, but also professionally, I may have been blackballed. That other NFL GMs and other coaches may have said, oh, we're never talking to you again because, what did you do to make him say that? I did nothing. I was trying to do my job and get another source to do my job better. So this is the situation that these women were in. You have the face of the franchise. We all remember when Deshaun Watson was drafted, his first NFL paycheck went to the cafeteria workers at the stadium because they had just had the hurricane, and he's doing all these charitable things and the Warwick Dunn Habitat for Humanity stuff. And so he's on this path, one step away from getting a freaking halo. And you're going to make this accusation that he tried to force you to perform oral sex on him. You are going to be shouted down. You are going to be shouted down. So these women were just put in this impossible situation. And fortunately, Ashley Solis, bless that woman, because I know she's still pushing forward and she did not take the settlement money yet. So she's going to fight. But it takes, like we talked about with Brian Flores, it takes 1 or 2 people who have absolute courage of their convictions and they know they were done wrong and they're not going to sit by and let it happen. But yeah, it's like you said, Tim, it seems like it was some kind of power thing. The insistence that they always be alone, the insistence that he has his own little face cloth, it sounded like, instead of, they bring sheets, bed sheets, and he's like, oh, I have this little face cloth, don't worry about it. And it's like,
it's just the right size. It's trial and error. I've been using it. I know how to use this thing.
You said other topics, so we can do other topics because I really
right. Oh, I was just gonna one last part to throw in about that we have left out, because you mentioned having your own stuff. I mean, he was supplied, the Houston Texans are now involved in this lawsuit as a defendant
Mhm.
because they knew about it. And Tony Busby, the attorney for the accusers. So I just wanted to mention that aspect of it too. The Houston Texans aren't off the hook.
And their
How do you
director of
think-
security gave him an NDA.
Well, in light of that, because a lot of these things all happened in previous seasons multiple years ago, how does the NFL get caught so flat-footed in that they're just litigating this and figuring it out now and couldn't have come to more conclusions a year ago when Deshaun Watson wasn't playing at all? And I don't know if they could have prevented the trade, but maybe advised teams not to make a trade for Deshaun Watson until they knew everything that was going to happen and it was at least resolved.
That's a great point, because the trade also, as we talked about earlier, begat an explosive contract that is going to affect all the teams. It's going to affect all the quarterbacks who come after, because it's the standard now in terms of not only you're willing to give this kind of money to somebody who has been accused of X, but you are just willing to pay, period, even for a great quarterback. So Josh Allen could look at Deshaun Watson's contract and say, well, time for me to, tear up mine, although he just signed it. That's a bad example. But any really good quarterback now has that as the comparison. Did the NFL do a disservice to its other owners by not, maybe we're throwing a lot at Cleveland for not having done a more thorough investigation, which it should have done. I'm not going to but yeah, where's the NFL's culpability in an investigation?
I think once the 2 grand juries came back and declined to press criminal charges against him, it just sort of became.
That was a head fake. I mean, that
Yeah.
was an okie doke there. I mean, the NFL they just looked at that and been like, all right, we're not going to. And Adam Schefter's unfortunate tweet about the, this.
They knew all along.
He didn't
knew all
say, but
along.
it was essentially, it only goes to show you, he knew he maintained his innocence, and this is why. Well,
Yeah.
there were still 20 some others to go.
Right. No, I think it was obvious, because that's exactly how it went down. Is as soon as the 2 grand juries declined to press criminal charges against him, then it just became open season. And any of the teams that were interested in acquiring him went forward. And of course, now we're waiting to see what the decision is in terms of his suspension or whatever formal punishment he's going to get from the NFL. He did not play last year, but it didn't sound like he wanted to play for the Texans last year regardless. So I think it was Mike Florio floated his own theory or possibility of punishment. If you say that, Deshaun didn't play last year, so then if you tack on 8 games this year, I don't agree with that, because Deshaun wasn't going to play last year regardless, according to him. He did not want to play for the Houston Texans anymore. The Texans weren't going to trade him because they had literally just signed him to a brand new contract. And so they were in the midst of a staring contest. So if Deshaun Watson didn't play last year, there was no punishment. He still got all of his money. He didn't, he wasn't mandated to undergo any sort of counseling or whatever the case may be. And so this punishment, I have said publicly on a different program, I think it should be 1 game for every woman who filed a civil complaint against him.
Ben Roethlisberger got what? How many games did he get? 4?
Wasn't it like 6? And then he appealed it down to 4.
I'll have to look that up, but yeah,
That
and
sounds
that
about
was
right.
1.
It wasn't a full year.
It was not a full year. I think,
but it was 1 accuser.
It was 1 accuser. Yes. This is
or
multiple.
1 incident.
It was multiple. Maybe it was 2 on Ben. Maybe. It's just, at the end of the day, playing in the NFL is not a right.
4 games.
Playing in the
2010,
NFL,
4 games for
4
Ben
games.
Roethlisberger.
Yeah, I think initially it was 6, and then he appealed it down to 4. This new process, with the third party, the former judge, who now has heard this case and everything like that, she is paid by the NFLPA and the NFL, which should make her unbiased in theory. And And
Well,
it's
doesn't the PA also have a vested interest in wanting to protect this contract and say everything's all right?
Yes, of course. And I've seen
for all the reasons we just
reports.
talked about. This is a new standard contract.
Right. This is a new standard in contract. The PA has to protect him because he is a member of the PA. I hope that they feel icky about protecting this particular member of the PA, because this isn't, it's not like Deflategate, to bring up a terrible time in my past having to cover that crap, but it's not like Deflategate where he was accused of some deflating footballs. Like, this is 24 women accusing this man of various degrees of sexual misconduct and misbehavior, and harming them mentally, physically, emotionally, whatever the case may be. So I'm very interested to see what the end result is. I hope it's a year at minimum.
You know what I would like to see? Because his contract is set up to absorb a year-long suspension in 2022. I would like to see the NFL, and which it has done so many times in the past, when it just drops that suspension on you in the middle of the season or whatever. It's done it before. Wait until December and then suspend him for however many games, including the playoffs. It cost Cleveland the playoffs and then some games next year too.
Yeah, it's because,
and I want to say too, I have never had an affinity for Baker Mayfield. I did enjoy his progressive commercials. I thought they were pretty good, but I've never really had an affinity for Baker Mayfield, the quarterback. But I'm rooting for this guy now. I mean, the guy got screwed over so badly.
It's obviously
conditional 5th round pick.
A conditional 5th round pick. It seemed clearly that relationship was beyond repair, but it is hilarious to hear the reports that the Browns wanted an adult in the room. And so they signed Deshaun Watson for $230 million guaranteed. Really?
All right. So I know you got to go.
Adult in the room.
I know you got to go, Shalise, and you got family obligations. And we like to talk about the memorabilia in the background, but I like your memorabilia back there. You got a lot of game used drawings. I'll leave the last question with Jonah because he had a basketball question for you. Well, not really a basketball question for you, but go ahead, Jonah.
Well, it's less a question than a topic, but I mean, lead story on Yahoo Sports right now is Brittney Griner, her trial in Russia starting, her pleading guilty. I'm just curious how closely you're following that and what you think about. I think for a while there was a lot of talk. We had it amongst ourselves and others. Why isn't this getting more media attention? Now it does seem to be more in the news of late, but what do you think about the way that story has developed over the last few months?
I think initially the family and her agents were told not to talk about it too much because she is a very public person in terms of, particularly for this situation, who becomes a political prisoner in Russia. It sounds like she pled guilty today to sort of hopefully grease the mechanism to eventually set her free. My understanding, or what I've read, is that 99% of all criminal cases, the person's found guilty in Russia anyway. So this was her sort of falling on the sword, I guess, for lack of a better phrase. But that it's scary and it's heartbreaking. And I think at its root, what we should never forget is the reason why she went to Russia in the first place is because the WNBA does not pay its players well enough. And I am not saying, and the WNBA players have never said that they should make the same amount of money that NBA players do. But the max contract for a player like Brittney Griner in the WNBA is $250,000. She was making 4 times that in Russia. So that's why she was there. And the people that I have seen on Twitter, whether they're real or bots or whatever, who are saying, well, she deserves what she gets. She was over there doing drugs. She had a micro amount, allegedly, of hashish oil on her. And she is a gay Black woman in a country that does not like any of those 3 things. They don't like gay people, they don't like women, and they don't like Black people.
She should be allowed to have hashish.
Yes, but also American police have planted drugs on Black people also. So if you just want to believe the lie, believe that, just take the story that, oh yeah, she was carrying all this stuff on her. Maybe she was. And in the past, it hasn't been a problem.
Are you saying we can't trust the Russians?
I am saying 100% you cannot trust the Russians. At the end of the day, I know what she did today, and this is far more complicated than my pay grade and that kind of stuff. I think what happened today in the trial was done, to try to appease the Russians. If she says, fine, yes, I did what you're accusing me of, but I still would not hold out hope that this means she's going to be home even before the end of this calendar year. This is a really complicated situation. It's possible that her WNBA career is over. This could be years. The other, I believe his last name is Whalen, the man who also that, keeps coming up. He's been there, I think, since 2018. This is really just a heartbreaking situation. And I feel most for Brittney and especially her wife, because, you just can't imagine the heartbreak of your spouse being in Russia. You can't see them. You can't, you couldn't even go to an American jail and, hold hands over a table with guards watching. She can't see her. She can't hold her. She can't do anything. It just sucks. Again, maybe Brittney Griner did bring some vape cartridges or whatever they were. Maybe she did, because in the past, the team that she plays for is owned by an oligarch. Oligarchs run Russia, and maybe people have just turned a blind eye to it in the past. And this time, because of Ukraine and all this other stuff, they decided to make an example of her. And again, maybe they just planted it on her and made it all up because she is who she is, and she went over there. But at the root of all of this, because people keep saying, well, if it was Tom Brady, if it was LeBron James, they wouldn't have had to go over there in the first place, because they are very well compensated for their skills. Brittney Griner is one of the 20 greatest women's basketball players who has ever walked the face of the earth. She shouldn't have to go to Russia to be well compensated. She should be able to be well compensated here.
But if it was, to that point, if it was one of the 20 greatest football players, basketball players, or maybe let's say hockey players, a sport where they might be more likely to go to Russia for some reason, do you think it would be handled any differently? I don't know if the government can really do much more than it's been doing so far.
I don't think so. I mean, we're talking about Russia. We're talking about Vladimir Putin.
In the midst of a war, yeah.
Right. He doesn't give a shit. Like we see this, I don't think. And
is there an ambassador? Because who used to do things like this was Muhammad Ali. But I mean, that's how big Muhammad Ali was. He would go into Iraq and free hostages. I mean, he did that.
Yeah.
Is there somebody like that could go over there and has that resonance of am here?
Hasn't Arnold Schwarzenegger spoken out really forcefully about how wrong it is that they invaded Ukraine? I mean, Could he do it? I imagine he's not from Russia, but he's from that Eastern Bloc Soviet Union.
Problem is that a lot of the Russian athletes are close with Putin.
Right.
And Alex Ovechkin, for instance,
there isn't. They don't want to.
Yeah,
they want to be on a different side of his beliefs.
I mean, if they speak out, they might end up dead. Right. I mean, look at the female tennis player from China who accused one of the Chinese, somebody in Chinese government of sexually assaulting her. We've barely seen her since,
As somebody who's covered the National Hockey League and Russian players, the idea of the Russian mob having their hands firmly on the shoulders of the players who are here in the United States because they have access to the people back home. Mm-hmm. They have access to your loved ones and the things that you are supposed to give back to the motherland and loyalty and public relations. And if you don't, you better watch it. I mean, that's real. That is real. That's why that there is some mystery around a lot of Russian athletes. And who's behind them and who's, why they don't speak out on certain things. Or why they do speak out in defense of what seems to be indefensible. It's out of fear, and that's very real.
Or it's money. I mean, look, we've seen American golfers over the last few months defend the Saudi government. So
yeah, maybe that's the
analogy
we should make, Shalise, right? Instead of if this was Michael Jordan, no, maybe we should be saying if this is Phil Mickelson,
right?
You know, they're over there chasing money from, you know, so
Phil Mickelson, Greg Norman. Hey, if you pay me enough money, I'll defend whatever you want me to defend. So
yes.
It might be along those same lines, you know. You said could somebody help? The first person I think of is Schwarzenegger. I know, you know, maybe it's frightening. It's,
you know, how David Hasselhoff is big in Germany. I wonder if there's somebody like off the wall weird who's really big in Russia, like Pauly Shore.
I don't think there's anybody. I think it would have to be like an organization. I don't know if the NHL could do it, or, you know, an oil company or somebody that does enough business in Russia to assert influence.
I think probably the companies that would have an appetite for that have done it for Ukraine.
Yeah.
Already.
Yeah.
But yeah, it's, you know, McDonald's pulled out and they just made a different McDonald's over there in Russia where they turned the golden arches on its side. You know, it's like see you McDonald's.
So Nike, I don't know.
Right.
I don't know I don't know what kind of business these companies do in Russia.
I think she's sponsored by Nike. I don't know how much money they've invested in her. That's another podcast for another time, is how Black female athletes don't make nearly as much money in endorsements as white female athletes do. So I don't know how much money Nike has invested in Brittney Griner. It's a heartbreaking situation. And the idea that she deserves to be a political prisoner because she may or may not have had a micro amount of, you know, a marijuana derivative is just insane. And you clearly have no idea what she's likely enduring right now. If you think that, you know, she has what's coming to her, and you know, it's fine that they're doing to her what they're doing to her. So it's just heartbreaking. But I think, you know, these things just move slowly. And today was an incremental step forward, but I would not, from what little I know, in the, you know, how much do any of us really know about what's happening behind the scenes? Like, I just don't think that what happened today and her saying I'm, you know, pleading guilty means that she'll be home next month or something like that. I think it's just Putin is Putin. I mean, he kills his own people. He kills the journalists.
Brittney Griner is leverage now.
Yeah.
She's not a suspect or a prisoner more as much as she's leverage.
Right. He's not going to give her up for, there's an arms dealer, I guess, or somebody that we have, the United States has. So, you know, he's not just going to give her up out of the kindness of what remnants of a heart he may or may not have. So it sucks. And again, if she brought something over, because she's done it before and it was never a problem, if she just forgot, you know, if she were in the United States, she'd get a fine and we'd move on and, you know, say, you know, you were dumb for doing that if she really did it. But this is a whole other level. Like, her life is in jeopardy. Her career is in jeopardy. Her life is in jeopardy. She's not, you know, at the local jail because she was stumbling through downtown Phoenix drunk one night. She's in Russia. She's a political prisoner in Russia.
Shalise, thank you for doing this. I always enjoy it, and we could go longer, but you don't want that, and I'm not going to subject you to it. But it means a lot to me that you do this.
All right, go get them. Hopefully you're not late because of this. So we're good.
And always good to talk through things with you. I don't know that we came up with a consensus on who's having the worst offseason. I think we made a solid case for all three.
Mm-hmm.
I think I'm still going with Cleveland, but Jonah made a pretty good case for Washington. I at the beginning of this conversation, I eliminated Washington. We both did. And now I think Washington's my number 2.
How about a team that has a player suspended for betting on the league isn't even in the discussion?
Yeah. And that's the other thing, to go back to Deshaun. If you suspended Calvin Ridley for a year based on a couple of bets, you have to suspend Deshaun for at least a year.
Right. I forgot about that.
That's traditionally not how things have gone, though. Pete Rose is banned from baseball for gambling, and
But
nobody.
he gambled on his own team, didn't he?
Well, but it's always gambling.
did
has always
Ridley.
been seen the
They
Cardinals.
were in
did.
parlays, and they were I think it was to win every time. But and that's what Pete Rose had said he was doing also.
Well,
but,
again,
and Pete
Calvin
Rose
Ridley
had
is
direct.
stupid because he just needed to use somebody else's name when he was
Right.
gambling.
Yeah.
When he was
Pete
placing
Rose
those
was
bets.
actively participating in the games he was betting on. Ridley was injured at the time,
Yeah.
but still, I'm sure had inside information when you're talking about all these different bets that you can make on, who's going to have more than 3.5 catches. Well, hell, I know we're going to go to my buddy pretty heavy in this game based on the opponent and what we're going to do. And that's not necessarily what Ridley did, but that's the dangerous stuff. You have the inside info on the upcoming game plan, and you may think, I'm not hurting anybody if I slip a little something to my friend, and your friend maybe becomes somebody who's just an associate because they get their hooks in you some way because they're, giving you drugs, or they got you out of a jam. They got all the different, whatever. There's all kinds of ways for seedy people to get their hooks in you, and then all of a sudden expect something in return. All right, Shalise, I'm going to let you go.
All right.
Because we're going to keep coming up with other things to prattle on about. Thank you, Shalise. Thank you, Jonah. Thank you to everyone for listening and for watching Tim Graham and Friends, brought to you by CTBK, CPAs and business consultants.
The financial needs of a business go beyond tax and attest services. That's why CTBK goes beyond accounting services and offers outsourced solutions through their affiliation with CFO Solutions Plus. These additional services allow clients to focus on their operational and long-term strategic goals. Trust CTBK's outsourced solutions to provide cost-effective, value-added financial services tailored to your company's needs. Call CTBK at 716-630-2400. Again, 716-630-2400. Or go to ctbk.com to learn more about CTBK's outsourced solutions.